Hello, and thank you for tuning in and listening. This is Daryl Ehrlich with the Billings Gazette, and this is Vietnam Voices, a project of the Billings Gazette sponsored by Master Lube. Today I am in studio. It is Veterans Day 2015, and I'm very excited to have Hal Haefer with me today. I'm looking at some photos that hopefully if you've seen the news article or been online, you'll see these too. But I'm very excited to talk to Hal about his experiences. Hal, thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it. Hal, let's talk a little bit about you were with the U.S. Army from 1965 to 1968. Let's talk about, though, I want to go back a little before that. What were you doing in 1965 before you went into the U.S. Army?
Well, I was trying to go advanced ROTC, failed because I have 20/800 uncorrected vision, wearing contact lenses, have since had LASIK surgery, and I was attending Montana State College, its name at the time, and graduated from there, getting ready to be drafted, decided to enlist so I could choose my MOS, military occupational specialty, rather than get drafted and do what they wanted me to do.
Okay. And so you chose, did you know what you wanted to do going in? I mean, did you choose the Army for a reason, and did you know what you wanted to do? I mean, how did that work for you?
Well, I had originally planned to go advanced ROTC. I didn't pass the physical because of my eyesight. I had been in the drill team at Bozeman for 2 years when ROTC was required, and I planned to become an officer with my commission in the Army, so I had a predisposition to go into the Army. I had studied psychology and sociology classes in college to include psychological tests and measurements. So when I take the entrance exam for the Army, I scored very, very high. And I was told I was qualified in the general technical score for anything I wanted in the Army. So I was looking at two things: intelligence specialist and the people who run internets of spies. And so I asked the recruiter, what are these? Well, I can't tell you, he says, because they're classified. So it's kind of like flip a coin, because I don't know what it's going to be. I had been told if I became a 97B40, a special agent, I would get $200 for civilian clothes, carry a pistol, never live on an Army fort, and I would conduct background investigations and do security checks. And oh, by the way, he says, the recruiter, these people never go to Vietnam. Where do I sign?
Right. So in 1965, obviously that was the year. It's the year that we commit combat troops. Although we'd had advisors there, obviously before 1965. You knew about Vietnam, and was that a concern for you going into the Army?
Well, these people never go to Vietnam.
Right.
Where's the concern?
Fair enough.
I'm not going. I'm going to be here in civilian clothes, helping people get their security checks done, get their clearances, and or are they keeping their classified documents properly right here in the States?
Okay.
So I had originally thought I was going to be a second lieutenant, ROTC-wise, wind up probably being an executive officer of some company in Vietnam. And I wasn't really upset about either one of those situations, really.
Okay. So you go through this, and they say, well, we can't tell you, but you think there's not going to be any Vietnam. So where do you do basic, and what are you trained to do? Let's walk through that.
I went to basic training in Fort Ord, California.
Okay.
And it really had a pretty big setup to process all the new enlistees and draftees. And then the second part of your question was, where did I?
Yeah, then after basic at Fort Ord, then where for advanced training?
AIT was at Fort Holabird in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
which is where the spooks or the spies or the agents or all the intelligence people get trained.
Yeah. What was training? So what was your training like? Let's talk about what you were trained to do.
Well, I learned to interview people, and I'm looking for these following items. LIDMAC, LIDMAC,
okay,
which is the military acronym, to remember loyalty, integrity, character, morals, and discretion. So when you apply for security clearance, you have to give some references. Special agent will come out, interview the references. From each reference, you want to get at least 2 character references from that reference, and it goes on and on until, with the report you write, you assume you've covered those characteristics. Somebody has said something about, oh, he's a very loyal person. Oh, this person has good character, has good morals, has good integrity. And you type those all up, send it in, and somebody somewhere decides you either get your clearance or you don't. And to have that job, I had to have my own security clearance at the level of top secret. And so you learn to interview, you learn how to secure classified documents, what level of protection they need for what they are.
Was that did you since you studied psychology and tests and all of that, was this good, interesting work for you?
Yes, and that psychology, I think, helped me get the high score on the entrance test. So I've always been interested in human behavior, either like sociology, a group at a time, or psychology, one person at a time. So here I am digging in this person's background to write the report as to these 8 people say these different things about this one person. You get to know the person fairly well and have kind of a sense on your own, although it's not your decision to make, whether they're worthy of a security clearance or not.
Right. So this is what you were trained to do, and did you start doing this then stateside? Is that?
Well, I assumed that as a beginning special agent, I would go to a large field office where there are a lot of special agents, and the old people would put their arm around the young people and get them off the road without hurting themselves. And as it happened, my class going through Fort Holabird of special agents was the first class ever to have anybody assigned to a combat unit. There were 5 of us, and I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and was put into the 705th Intelligence Detachment, which is attached to the 3rd Special Forces, whose area of interest is Africa, south of the Sahara. I think this is kind of an interesting part to the story. I'm put in a Special Forces unit, airborne unit. I'm not airborne qualified. I'm not supposed to be in a combat unit. I get called into my commanding officer's office. He sits me down and he says, "Private Haefer, would you like to go airborne?" I said, "Well, I tried back in basic training, but I've got bad eyes. My corrected vision's fine, but my uncorrected vision is atrocious." Thinking I could have it, Private Haefer. He gets on the phone. He calls down to the medical facility. He says, "Captain so-and-so," this is pretty much a direct quote, "Captain whoever, this is Major Strauss. I am sending Private Haefer down to pass his airborne physical. Do you, Roger?" So I get my little paperwork. I go down to the medical people, put it on the desk. They stamp it and hand it back to me. Never examined my eyes at all. But airborne people have something about them that if you're not airborne, we don't need whatever you got.
Right.
Although that's not true, but they will call a non-airborne person a straight leg or a leg because he's not airborne qualified. Airborne people keep their feet and knees together and their leg is bent to the point of control, and you would often chide them when you're drilling and running around. Do you know what a jody call is?
No.
It's like when a bunch of people who are running and shouting whatever the leader is shouting back. And they will chide straight-leg people because they're not airborne, just to be having something to say.
Right, right. So there was a cachet about this. There was a swagger.
Oh, sure.
Did you? Was this a happy? I mean, on one hand, you're getting kind of reassigned, but yet you're also getting into something that you had wanted to probably originally. What are your emotions? What do you think?
I tried to. The military speak is, I've got some paperwork that I want to get some response to. It's on Form 1049. So I 1049'd back in basic training to go airborne and was refused then. They look at my paperwork and they have a big red rubber stamp, hits the ink pad, hits my paperwork. Individual is not qualified for Airborne Ranger Special Forces in red ink, is not qualified for, and I assume that's that until my major sends me down to pass my physical, and then I'm back into airborne.
Okay. So let's
jump school.
So then, is that where you go? So you were going to go and train airborne jump school, special forces, all of that, or do you?
Well, one step at a time.
Sure, you bet.
I'm in an airborne unit. I'm in special forces, but I'm not airborne qualified. So get yourself down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and get airborne qualified, so that you're not an embarrassment to our unit to be running around with no airborne stripe on your shoulder.
So it was about getting a stripe too, about going through jumping through the hoops.
Yeah.
Or jump. I guess hoops aren't exactly what airborne jump through, but.
No.
So let's talk about, was airborne training hard for you?
Well, many people who go off to the basic airborne course fail. But to me, as a college-educated person going through the course, I see many things they do that is just good methodology. For instance, you're going to jump out of an airplane. What's the first thing they have you jump off of? A 6-inch step. Just from 6 inches off the ground on a little set of steps into a sawdust pit. And when you master the 6-inch step, you move on to the 12-inch step and the 18-inch step. Then, and this is where most people drop out, there's a 34-foot tower that you jump out of. And when you're 34 feet up in the air, needing to jump out of a perfectly good doorway, that's where most people's fear of heights is beyond their ability to get themselves out the door, and they just get sent home. Then you go up to the 250-foot tower and jump from that. Then you're ready to jump out of an airplane. So it's sort of like, to answer your question more directly, the physicalness, the athleticism of it. Because you're running 5 miles a day, you never walk anywhere, you're being indoctrinated, and you think you're pretty tough, and you want to stay there and not disappoint the people back at your home unit. So it's a pride thing, an athletic thing, a challenging thing. I'm a young, just out of college type, and I'm ready to live life and find out what's out in the world and go from there.
It seems to me that you're right. Having a degree in knowing psychology, having a degree and having that kind of understanding probably gave you a different perspective and appreciation for what they were doing and a way to accept it and not fight it. Because I think you understood probably better what they were trying to do than just it was the Army trying to be the Army. Huh. Does it? So you get trained in that, and then what? You make
I go
it
back to my unit.
Okay.
And Special Forces mission is to train, advise, and equip.
Okay.
So, you're not in a foreign country. You don't have indigenous personnel. Who are you going to train? You're going to train each other. And so that's pretty much all I did while I was with the 3rd Special Forces, is have this guy train me, that guy train me, of what I knew about, train them. And we, at one point, went on a field training exercise to Colorado. We had been living at Fort Bragg, and that's pretty close to sea level. The government wanted research on the effect of severe change in altitude for the combat effectiveness of the troops. So we get in a plane, leave North Carolina, land in Denver, get in trucks, drive up to the Continental Divide, and then they start running us through the hoops to see what, if anything, we had lost and how much of it we had lost in our combat effectiveness until you finally acclimatize to the altitude you're at, which is a little different from each person.
Right.
But it's there. It has to be dealt with.
And you were from Montana, correct?
Yes.
So had you grown acclimated to North Carolina and Georgia, or was that a hard thing coming back, or did you fare better being in Montana? I had an
advantage. I was maybe 30% better. You know, usually a lot of guys would have a headache for 2 days. Mm-hmm. I'd have a headache for half a day, because I'd also lived for 5 years at Mystic Lake, which is even higher altitude than here in Billings.
Yeah.
Or in Great Falls, which is where I lived at the time.
Did you? Let's talk. So you trained other people. Did you train them in intelligence because that's what you knew, or how did you train each other?
Well, it's like you kind of do things as a group. So your group is tasked with something, and then you go do it. Mm-hmm. Like one of the things we had to do when we were in Colorado is survival.
Okay.
So for 2 days, we couldn't eat any food that we had usually provided to us. And so we go and we find a rabbit or a gopher or whatever. And we're broken down into A teams. So it's kind of this group of 18 people versus that group of 18 people versus the other group of 18 people. And we're going to run around in the woods looking for each other and hiding from each other and eating gophers and woodchucks and whatever, and just finding water, doing what you need to do, staying secure. And the medics would teach us some first aid. The radio people would teach us some radio stuff, and so on. And where I fit was in the team is to help the commanding NCO, because he's paired up with an intelligence person, and that's the slot that I fit into. But running around the mountainside in Colorado isn't a lot of intelligence stuff to work.
I imagine so.
So let me do what I can do. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting on that exercise was to communicate on the radio. You needed a radio man who does Morse code, a 20-pound generator to generate your own electricity. So my part is taking a turn carrying the 20-pound generator in my backpack. And if you already start off with a 60-pound pack, another 20-pound pack at high altitudes slows you down quite a bit.
Yeah, you're working.
But if the two radio men are carrying the rest of their equipment, the radio and the tripod, it's the rest of us fools that are supporting them by carrying the 20-pound generator.
Right. So then what? What after all this training, then what for you?
Well, I come back from this field training exercise, which was a month long in Colorado, and there were my orders for Vietnam.
Weren't you told you weren't supposed to go over to Vietnam?
As a special agent. So where's my recruiter?
Right. Probably.
I'd like to have a little chat with him.
Right. Right. Well, he did say I can't tell you that, right?
Yeah. So I was levied to go to the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam.
Okay. Did you? That had to be scary. I'm guessing this is around 1966, 60.
Yes.
That had to be scary for you. I mean, thinking that you'd kind of, I don't want to say, wrong cliche to use, dodge the bullet, but that you weren't going to Vietnam, and here you've got orders, and when you're in the military, you don't say, I got a question. You just go.
I didn't have any strong at that point in time.
Okay.
It was still an adventure. You know, life is unfolding, and I'm finding out stuff, and I'm testing myself, and I'm seeing what I can do for somebody else. And I'm pretty much satisfied with that process.
Okay, so you get orders to go over to the 101st. Let's talk about how you get ready to deploy and then go over there.
Well, I didn't have much time after I got back from that field training exercise. I had time to drive back to Montana, drop off my car, get in an airplane, go to San Francisco. I think it's like 3 breakfasts and a lunch getting over.
Yeah.
And I arrive, like all the other GIs, just a plane full of people. And when I get off the plane and start walking across the tarmac, this Jeep comes racing up to me. Now there's 200 people walking across a tarmac, and he comes driving up to me because he's a Spec 4 in the 5th Special Forces. I'm the only one on that airplane who is wearing a green beret, which is no longer my unit, but you stay in the uniform of your old unit until you sign into your new unit. So I'm in a green beret too. He comes and asks me, where can I take you? And I said, well, I'm levied for the 101st. He said, would you like us to change that? Yeah, sure.
All right.
Not that I have anything against the 101st, but I've started to buy into the, I don't know, the myth, the romance, the status, the prestige, or whatever it is that this country had at that point in time over Green Berets. John Wayne's movie hadn't quite come out yet.
Right. There's different training and different qualification for Green Berets, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little? I mean, I know I'm jumping back, but I want to...
What you're supposed to be is fully qualified in 3 different things. So I'm 1 down and 2 to go.
Okay.
And haven't made it yet, and may not make it, but we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when it comes. What's really going on is when I first tried to go advanced ROTC, everybody's going by regulations, even Special Forces. Well, in 1966, the resources of Special Forces worldwide, because they've got units in Germany and wherever, were down to the point that here's a person who's a good person. They're not on paper or in pen qualified, but we're going to take them and use them because, hey, we're short-handed.
Right.
We're under strength. At that time, Special Forces would try to maintain roughly 100 A-teams along the Laos-Cambodian border, and so that's 12 men in 100 locations, and most camps at that time had a shortfall of about 1 or 2 people.
Okay.
Which isn't critical, but if you can get somebody who can get the job done, do it.
Right, right, and probably waiting, if you're already down, waiting to have more people trained, it's only going to make your problem worse. Yeah.
I mean, a Special Forces medic spends almost a year becoming a medic, just that part alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and your enlistments are only 3 years?
Yes.
Yeah. So a third of the time is just training to become something. So let's so you're there, and he says, "Hey, you want your orders changed?" And this guy in a Jeep comes up to you, and you say, "Sure." Then what?
I go to the 90th Replacement Depot, spend 2 days,
So you're in Tonsanut, right? Did you fly into Tonsanut, or did you fly
I flew into Tonsanut.
Okay.
And nearby is Long Binh Junction.
Yep.
Which is where the 90th Replacement Depot is. And I wait there 2 days, and here comes somebody with orders to the 5th Special Forces. They arrange transportation, and I come dropping out of the sky to the Trang.
Okay, that's a good entrance. So,
well, what I thought was even cooler than that, I mean, this is a really neat unit I'm a part of. I arrive at the headquarters of Special Forces. I don't know if I was a corporal yet or not. Or PFC probably by then. Private Haefer, we have 2 jobs you're eligible for. We've got this and we've got that. Which one do you want? This is the Army.
Right.
Which one do you want? Well, what they had was the possibility of establishing the source control section. What had been happening is you're paying your spies, I'm paying my spies, she's paying her spies, everybody's paying their spies, getting their information. But these people started selling their information to the French. So they're getting pretty good at it by now. And I'll write one report, and I'll sell it to you, and you, and you, and you. And our government will wind up paying 5 times for one report.
It's good money if you can get it.
So what they want us to do, a combat unit, is register our sources. We've never done it before. But Westmoreland gets what Westmoreland wants because he's Westmoreland.
Right. I've heard this.
So I get back into an airplane, fly back to the headquarters, MACV headquarters, get the copy of their regulations requiring them to do it, which is in platoons, companies, divisions, whatever, which is not Special Forces. It's A teams, B teams, C teams, headquarters. And so, since I do have a college education, it's like plagiarizing. I go back to Nha Trang, go to my little desk, and rewrite their regulation into our speak. And there's our regulation. It goes up the chain of command, comes back down approved. And my commander's pretty happy with me because he didn't have to do this. Then comes the implementing of our source control section. So our sources have to be photographed, fingerprinted, little ID cards, sent off to the headquarters in Saigon, and they will decide who gets to have which source. Would you believe that your very, very best sources get scarfed up by the CIA?
Hard to believe that the CIA...
There's my government in action.
I can't believe that.
But pretty much our sources were wherever our A teams are, and they're out in the boondocks, and not of much political interest to most agencies, but a process that's being required by the commanding officer. If you got that many stars, you get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a problem that 5th Special Forces didn't have with their commanding general, because I've done the little paperwork. We start fingerprinting, photographing people, sending it in, and they're pretty happy with what's happening out of the source control section, which is me.
Right. So you're is this interesting work? Is this is it meaningful? I mean, how would you describe
the challenge.
It? Right.
This hasn't been done before. They're expecting something out of you. It's, to me, pretty much as simple as plagiarizing somebody else's regulations and putting your name where their name was. But getting the people out in the field to do what they need to do was more challenging. But I also got to do a lot of going out, chit-chatting with this guy out here and this one over here and this one over there, and seeing the country. And it was only 6 months long.
So tell me a little bit about what were your impressions of the country? What was Vietnam like, and what do you remember about it?
Well, I remember that I was seldom, if ever, dry.
Okay.
I would take a shower before going to bed, towel down a lot, 2 towels, talc down, in my little shorts and flip-flops, walk slowly back to my hooch, lay down on my top sheet under a fan, and for about 5 minutes, I was dry. Beautiful time.
Those best 5 minutes of the day.
Oh, yeah. Because in 10 minutes, my own body heat, my own moisture, I'd be wet again. So you're either wet internally going out to your field gear, or it's raining on you and you're really wet.
Right. And it rains a lot there, and when it does, it comes down pretty furiously.
I was there for 18 months, 2 rainy seasons, 1 dry season. But the dry season is pretty wet.
Right, and hot too, right? Yes. So you're there, and you're going around to all these different A teams. Is that
Yes.
Is that what you're doing? What are conditions like that and those A teams like? What is it like?
It's you land on a helicopter that just needs to be going somewhere else. It'll come back and pick you up later on. They drive out to the airstrip in a Jeep, and you find out the hospitality of the team house. So they've got beer, because they sell weapons on the black market, get money, captured weapons, not government property.
Right.
And so have a beer, and what do you need, and how can we help you up? And we're kind of busy here because, they're getting shot at, and we'll do what we can for you. And then the helicopter comes back. You tell them what's going on and how it's important to your commander, and they kind of buy into it. And one of the things that you find out is the enemy is within and without. And they never stop to think frequently that they're a VC in my camp. I need to do what I can to find out who they are and neutralize them.
Right.
So there are methods you can use that are probably classified as to eliciting, plus besides common sense, a person's political views and the people outside your compound. There's enemy out there nearby, keeping an eye on what you're doing. And so you're there kind of stressing the importance of doing something along these lines as your time and resources allow. So it's kind of a sell job in a way.
Right. And
a training job in a way.
And so this is uniquely suited for a guy with a psychology background. What did you, so did you come up with a roster or at least some way to make sure we didn't buy the same intelligence report 5 times?
Well, that's at a higher level.
Okay.
And so most of our reports were too low grade. Like, I saw this enemy unit going through this area, and their strength was and their weapons were. And so you're also training your sources how to be better sources. Here's what I need to know. That's what I want you to tell me in your report.
Okay. And so some of it, so training sources had to do with give me the information I need, not all the information you know. It's need versus all, everything. What was the, when you were back at headquarters, at command, those guys obviously who were on the A teams on the line, I'm guessing they were getting fired at a lot. Were you getting fired at, or was headquarters relatively safe?
The Trang hadn't been attacked in 2 years.
Okay.
When I was there for 6 months, we had attacks by sappers and mortars. And the colonel's car, he had a 65 Chevy, olive drab, of course.
Right.
The current color for any commanding colonel. And I've got pictures of a ordinary Army Jeep that just shrapnel all over the place. And the sapper attacks You understand what a sapper is?
Yep.
I'm sitting up in bed in the middle of the night wondering, why the heck am I sitting up in bed? And then they blow up another helicopter because our compound is the flanking protection to an airstrip. And so we're providing support to the Air Force. And the enemy had went through the gate or the fence at the end of the airstrip, and they're going up for the big planes, which are behind revetments.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't make it that far, so they got spotted. They turned around, started going back the way they came, which is also, they came in right beside 5 helicopters, so they drop a satchel charge beside each of the 5 helicopters, and I'm awake after the first helicopter blows up. It's time to grab your stuff and go to your bunker, your battle station.
That's got to be kind of a scary moment. I mean, just to wake up and hear that then.
I don't feel a lot of fear there because I've been indoctrinated.
Okay.
And I know what I need to do when I need to do it. And that's what I'm thinking of. This requires me to do thus and so I'm in the business of doing thus and so.
Right. So it was trained, it was a reaction, it was automatic, reflexive?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's like my 3rd parachute jump in jump school. I had a malfunction.
Okay.
It could have resulted in 2 people's death. We were jumping C-119s, which have 2 doors in the back end. You're required to make a strong and hardy exit from the airplane and leap out about a yard. So if this guy jumps out 3 feet and this guy jumps out 3 feet, they shouldn't get sucked under the fuselage of the airplane they're jumping out of. But I made a weak exit and he made a weak exit. And when I do my check canopy, there's 2 footprints on the top of my parachute. If that remains the same, my parachute's going to take the air out of his parachute is going to drop him through my parachute, taking the air out of my parachute. We could have 2 casualties right there on the drop zone. But over and over and over and over and over and over again, they will tell you, take immediate action, pull the riser that's farthest away from where this person is. He's on top of my parachute. He's not dead center. Pull parachute, riser off to the distance and away from the center of the parachute that you're standing on. We both did that. We both landed. And then we started looking around for each other, and he was a way far distance away from me. I had to shout to communicate with him. Well, subsequent to that, you think about this training they're giving me is keeping me alive, which I would take me back to another story in the basic airborne course. When it comes time to do the 250-foot tower, we all run down there. They sit us on the ground. They send the first guy up, and he's in a hoop with the canopy, cable in the middle. They pull him up 250 feet, and he's ready to go. There's speakers on the tower. The drill instructors on the ground have megaphones in their hand. And to talk to him, your helmet has tape on it with a number, a unique number. So they say, 625, are you ready? And he says yes. And when they let him go, 250 feet up, that freaked him out. His 2 legs, which had had the shape he was supposed to be in, go straight out, side to side. And they shouted him all the way to the ground, 651 or whatever his number is, keep your feet and knees together, keep your feet and knees together, keep your feet and knees together, keep your feet and knees together. Snap, snap. Right in front of me. He breaks both ankles. I mean, you could audibly hear the snaps. So training was delayed. till they came and got his body out of there. My number was next. I was spooked at that point in time.
Sure.
And I walk over to get hooked up, and I'm thinking, keeping his feet and knees together must be pretty important.
Right, yeah. I'm going to lock him.
And so I get up to the top of the tower, make sure I'm in proper parachute position. They call the number. It was really a pretty gentle landing because they had plowed about 3 feet deep the day before, because it had rained the day before that. And it was like, I wouldn't say fluff, but it wasn't the hard impact that I had thought. So you go back to, if you do what you're told to do, the way you're told to do it, these people have been doing this for thousands of years. They've got it down pretty well now. There's where my trust goes. I don't try to figure out the problem for myself. I take the textbook solution and stick with that until I know better, which seldom came along, but I would know better.
Right. So when you're over there, you're doing that. What else? Tell me kind of what an average day looks like for you.
And where am I at in the process?
In the Trang.
Well, I've got to go. One of the things was we used to have a morning assembly for making sure everybody was there. And general orders were given and whatever. So there's a gathering of all the people in the Trang. And we started getting hit during these meetings. So they started holding them before daylight. So before daylight, you're out for a company roll call.
Wow.
And then you would go to breakfast and then off to work in your little office in the Trang. And besides dealing with source control, I was also in charge of the map room. And so 100 A teams out there are in 100 different locations within the country with a different set of maps of the proper scale to be used in maneuvering around through this country. The guy who had the map room before me had come from the 101st Airborne Division, extended for 6 months so he could get transferred to the Special Forces. But he was not Mama's favorite child. He did a very poor job in the map room. It was a mess. It probably took me 2 weeks of being there to straighten it out. And then send out the appropriate maps to the appropriate A-teams so that they could land navigate for where they were, run their patrols, write on them, throw them away, use a new one. The other thing I did was I'm in the Trang Special Forces headquarters. On Friday of every week, about 5 or 6 of us would get together because we would draft up the weekly intelligence summary, an INSUM, the weekly INSUM, which tells you what's happening all countrywide. Every Special Forces A-team sends in a report. It gets written up and winds up being about 5 or 6 pages long. It needs to be, you cut stencils because photocopy machines haven't shown up yet, but Gestettlers have. And since you're Special Forces, there will be no strikeovers, no misspelled words, no strikeovers. And so you could be on the last paragraph and make a mistake, rip it out and start all over again. But write up these intel summaries for the week. And in my section, S2 section, I was one of the few people that had a top secret clearance. But all these reports, classified reports, that would come to the S2 section that were classified to be filed, they'd usually give to me because I had the top secret clearance. Well, beside the building we were in is a concrete bunker that if we're overrun, that's where the commanding officer goes, because he has communications there separate from the rest of the communications, and he'd have access to all the classified reports of anybody at any time and everywhere. So I'm the guy who the sergeant comes by, Haefer, file this. So I'd get up, get my little key, go out, go into this classified bunker, concrete bunker, with my classified document. I would probably, I don't want you to pass this around to anybody else. I'd spend another 2 to 3 minutes out there just scanning this classified document before I put it on its clipboard and hung it on the wall. Now, an officer with a need to know, I had a need to file. I didn't have a need to know.
Right.
But if you had a need to know, you'd come to me or somebody in our office, get the key, go out there. I would hand you your report, let you sit down at the card table with one chair. I would stand there and wait for you to read your document, take it back, put it on the clipboard, hang it on the wall. So that would come by as it needed to come by. The maps was when I had time. And flying around, training people how to do their source control is pretty much what I did for those 6 months.
Okay.
But the first 6 months, remember, you could do one of these two jobs.
Yep.
I picked what I picked. Just new guy drops out of the sky, get a choice. Now my first 6 months is up. They come to me and say, what assignment would you like for the rest of your tour? That took me totally unexpected.
Right, because you're pretty happy doing what you're doing, right?
Well, I had my choice of two things, and I'm doing it.
Right.
Now, of all the jobs we've got that you'd be qualified for, which one would you like? What I had done is learned about Project Oak.
Okay.
Looked pretty good to me. So I said, I'll take 6 months of Project Oak in Saigon, in civilian clothes, living in I think it was $350 a month room or a $750 a month villa, and actually be a case officer running an intelligence net. The lieutenant was in charge. I would be his assistant. The two of us would run a network.
Okay.
And take a look at that, if you would.
Sure.
I knew something about that, but I didn't know everything because networks are compartmentalized. I only knew what I needed to know to do my part of a cell, but there are other cells doing, well, they're elsewhere doing else what. And I know I'm in Project Oak, but I don't know anything about Operation Phoenix.
Okay.
And so it's 6 months of going and getting your contact, who is a local indigenous personnel, who's at the top of your network, and he has the reports from all the people lower down in your network. You pick up your interpreter, you take John, which was what we called him because it was a lot easier than Win Van Win or whatever.
Right.
He would translate the reports, and then I would get his translation, and I'd type it up into Army speak and send it off to the CIA in the sky. They did that for 6 months.
And this Project Oak, let's talk. Can you Tell me a little bit about, I can read it here, but I want you to tell me so you were part of this. You were gathering reports, having them translated. What was this a larger part of? What were you doing?
Well, of Operation Phoenix.
Of Phoenix, yep.
But since I knew what I needed to know, I didn't know everything, which is the way intelligence networks are. And so the rest of the story that's on that page, the big news there, I didn't know anything about because I wasn't a part of that.
Right.
I mean, I was a part of it, but
you didn't know you were a part of it.
I didn't know about Operation Phoenix. I knew about Project Oak, Project Cherry, all these other different things, but not this.
So this is counterterrorism, and I'm just scanning. This is trying to figure out who is working with the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong obviously was working with the NVA and had backing from China and Russia. So you were really trying to figure out who was against us.
Yes.
And
I mean, it could be a village chief. It could be a mama-san cooking soup at a crossroads. It could have been somebody that's in their government. It's just, this is what I know about this guy. Send it up. You get a lot of reports about this guy. You decide what's going to happen to this guy because I only have one little piece of the picture. And it's not my job to know what to do with this guy. Just tell you what I know about him.
So were most of those reports fairly benign? Here's who this person is and here's what we know? Or what would these reports contain?
With my network, it was people out in the boondocks. Mm-hmm. And this enemy unit came passing through my location with this many men, this many weapons, and when I finally got them traded, chit-chat with them, and where are you going? What are you up to? What's going to happen? Where have you been? And getting intel on military movement by the enemy. Mm-hmm. One of the things I thought was pretty cool is once you know something and you get paid for it, you've got to have a strategy for getting paid. Because if you're getting your $5 a week every week, because you manage at least one report every week, how are you going to mask all this wealth you now have? Because nobody else around you is getting $5 a week.
Right.
And so that part of the training needs to be conducted. And one of the things that I thought was pretty ingenious that came out of the CIA, your source is a woodcutter. So what's he doing? He's out in the middle of the forest with his axe, chopping down trees, putting it into little bundles he can carry back to the village and sell. Well, when he gets back to the village, he may have passed the unit that you're interested in that morning, and his intel is getting less valuable as time goes by because they're getting farther away from him. But if we have him take his little woven basket, the enemy comes walking through that morning, his little woven basket is sitting there, but it's got a false bottom in it. And between the two bottoms is an electronic transfer signal device. And they first show up, he turns his basket upside down, and it starts emitting a signal. We triangulate on this signal that just starts, early this morning, figure out where he's at. That's where the enemy was when we first heard the signal. What are we going to do about it? We've got actionable intel at that point. We can send over airplanes and find a large unit moving through the jungle and deal with them, all because he's got his little basket and he's been trained. If the enemy comes through and you turn your basket up, there'll be a payday for you. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. I could do that.
And I'm not going to arouse suspicion. And wow. So these are so
that's the intel I was getting is where units are, how many guns they had, what kind, where they were going if they would talk to you at all. Not the political stuff. A guy that was also in my Project Oak, one of his sources was on the Saigon legislature. So he was getting a lot of different stuff than I was getting, but I never saw his stuff.
Was it a so did the information that you were getting back strike you as interesting when you read through it? I mean, because even if you were just gonna,
well, not what I was getting,
yeah,
because I was getting military movements.
Okay.
But when I was going into that bunker, looking at what other units were doing and what's happening across the border.
Right.
You know, Laos, Cambodia is much more interesting.
Right. Tell me a little bit about working with, are you worried, you're worried about both Viet Cong and NVA, right? Are you worried about both in the intelligence community? So it's not like you're fighting primarily, you know, in some groups, if they're down on the Delta, they were more worried about Viet Cong than NVA. But if you were up on the DMZ, you saw a lot of North Vietnamese regulars. Yes. You're worried about both from an intelligence perspective?
Sure. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, is it hard, if you're in the intelligence community, I hope this question comes out right, is it hard not to be paranoid? I mean, you trying to figure out who's against you and who's with you. This is not a traditional warfare.
For the 6 months I was in Saigon, we lived in 4 different places.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Does that sound paranoid?
That sounds, yeah, you're moving a lot.
Yeah.
And you're in plain clothes, right? Are you a civilian at this point?
I've documented a civilian.
Okay. What do you do? What's the cover for that? Because you're just a civilian hanging out in Saigon during Vietnam doesn't seem very plus.
Black briefcase.
Okay.
With a .38 caliber pistol in it. That's my sole defense. Plus, the Army has Army green Jeeps with stencils on the bumper as to who they are and where they are, right?
Right.
I'm driving a black Jeep with no marks on the bumper. And there's a lot of black Jeeps running around Saigon.
Okay.
And so, moving from place to place, driving a black Jeep, which I don't really get a whole lot out of that, but telling everybody that I work for the Alaska Bar and Transfer Company. And so I go here, I go there, I meet my little agent here, pick him up at a different place at a different time, and just playing like hide and seek with the bad guys.
Was it exciting? I mean, I think people think of intelligence and moving around as the stuff of James Bond, but a lot of this was just reporting and feeding information up the chain, too.
Yes.
So on one hand, I can see where it could be kind of exciting. On the other hand, I could see where it could be kind of routine.
Oh, it's routine.
Yeah. Was it, did you fear, when you're in a situation like that and you're gathering intelligence, do you fear for your own life?
It isn't on your mind much.
Okay. Tell me, are you working with the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese? Do you have counterparts? I know from one of our military intelligence officers who is here, he actually was enlisted, was an officer, but he talked about they were assigned to work with some Vietnamese counterparts.
In Project Oak, it would never be a counterpart.
Okay.
Because that's just way too risky.
Mm-hmm.
Where you'd be working with your counterpart is when you're running an operation, a patrol, trying to find the enemy, trying to get your counterpart to engage the enemy, because there was the big disappointment. Our intel, we work our butt off to know what we need to know, and they're over here. Here's the enemy over here. If we go there, we can put the hurt on them. Our unit is over here. Let's go over here. No, we're going to go over here. Why? Oh, that's a good place. There's nothing over there. And so the units we were running on patrols with really are under the command of the South Vietnamese. Not ours, theirs. And so you get very, very disappointed because you're willing to give more for them than they are for themselves. And you say, this isn't right.
Yeah.
You know, we're willing to go and engage the enemy and bring our technology and our firepower to help you but you won't even help yourself because you're not prepared to die for your own country, your own independence. You're willing to let us
die
because we've got the Marines over there and the Navy SEALs and some other wild stuff going down.
Right. Was it, that must have been hard for you to accept or swallow that you saw fellow countrymen, Americans, be more dedicated than their forces.
But it's kind of like, well, what's your understanding of third world?
Poverty-stricken,
and
poor, and
very
hopeless.
Poor education, and desperation. I mean, why does a bar girl become a bar girl? What's her other choice? You know, the other choice that works, that you see frequently, is the father is a barber. His daughter will do your nails. So she's in the barbershop all day with dad just to keep her out of the clutches of these wild Army guys, Marine guys, you know, foreigners to their country. But you look at that situation and you say, what would the people I know back home do if they had this same lot as these people? So it's like, don't rush to judgment.
Yeah.
Because I've seen what they've done, but I've never really lived in their shoes.
Yeah, you did see. I mean, I imagine being in Saigon and being able to travel. You did see a lot of it. What was your impression of Vietnam, other than hot and besides the weather and the climate and the what was the impression of the country itself, Hal?
Well, I'd never really experienced bribery.
Okay.
And so almost everything is escalated its cost due to everybody taking a cut of whatever's happening. And so you say to yourself, well, this isn't right. As an example, Special Forces is running the CIDG. They train, advise, and equip the Civilian Irregular Defense Group to be the Army that undertakes the task that the CIA tasks Special Forces with. And so you recruit this little guy and you give him his weapon and his uniform and feed him and teach him to be a military guy. And his sergeant comes up and says, this 18-year-old is married and has 3 kids. The heck, you say? He's married and he has 3 kids. Oh yeah, your records are wrong. When he came and said that he was a single 18-year-old kid, he misspoke. You didn't understand him. He has a wife and 3 kids to support, which qualifies him to move here on the pay scale. Okay, because how are we going to know better? So he starts getting a bigger paycheck, which also means his sergeant is getting a bigger cut of his paycheck, and he's giving a bigger cut to the sergeant's commanding officer. Everybody's on the take for the one guy's little salary. Well, that's fundamentally wrong because we're paying too much money for what he really is and what we've agreed to. But you're lying to us to get a bigger cut because that's the culture. I don't know if you inherited this from the French, but it's been there since the French were there. And maybe it's always been there because you were colonized and didn't have the freedom to run your own country and do things honestly and fairly.
Right, right. Did it, when you were over there, what's your opinion? A lot of what you're trying to do is figure out who the enemy is. You know where the NVA, or you have intelligence reports about the NVA, which acts a little bit more like an army, but the Viet Cong acts as from everything I've read, as guerrillas and insurgents and kind of and it's hard to tell who's that. What's your opinion? What did you learn about the Viet Cong? Because you're getting all kinds of information about it.
Well, as many things as you could criticize about a third world country, there's things that are just absolutely amazing to their credit.
Okay, tell me about some of those.
Okay, I'm a Vietnamese communist. I come to your compound I enlist. What's going to happen? You're going to feed me? You're going to clothe me? I'm going to get nice boots to wear, a weapon, and you're going to train me, and then all I've got to do is desert. And I went through the training I need to do the job I want to do against you because you sat there and did all those things for me because you trust people too much, or, I don't know what our problem was, but they took full advantage of it. And I think that's pretty credit worthy.
Yeah. They I've also heard guys say about at least the Viet Cong is they could make bombs out of our junk. They were really, really industrious, really crafty like that. Tell me, you've got a picture here of a Viet Cong. You've got some pictures here, and again, we'll hopefully share these when we go to press with this. But let's talk about what is this picture of a Viet Cong here?
Well, some high-ranking Air Force dude in his air-conditioned office decides to put a B-52 strike on 2 villages that are way, way out in the boondocks. Down the chain of command comes the order, go do a bomb damage assessment on this location. You follow your orders, right?
Right.
You get a patrol of, say, 40 to 60 guys, 1 or 2 Americans, and you go out to the location that they said these 2 villages are. You're starting to get close to the villages, plural, and a shot rings out. Being as well trained as you are, you don't jump in the ditch. You start with full firepower from wherever this bullet was fired from. You return maximum firepower to suppress the enemy because that's what you do in an ambush. Ambushes are not stronger units than yours attacking you. It's weaker units than yours attacking you. So the American on the patrol calls a ceasefire after this firepower supremacy has been established. We approach the area. We find this person has been wounded in the foot. They have a huge French, probably World War I vintage rifle with a bayonet that would go clear through a buffalo and suppress this person, give them first aid, and decide to take them back to that A-team's location, that base, and interrogate the person. Put them on a helicopter. This place is so far out in the boondocks that I'm sure this person had never seen a helicopter up close before, certainly had never been on one, scared them just very visibly when the sucker lifts off the ground, because this is really a totally new life event for them. And come to the helipad, want the person to get off the helicopter. They don't understand what you want. So the American that's in there with this person reaches under the armpits and puts him on the ground. That's the first time we know it's a female. So this female, with her huge, old French bolt-action rifle, takes on 40 to 60 guys with fully automatic weapons. What kind of person does that take? The reason we only got shot at once is because she had a total, when she started, 5 corroded rounds. She fired the first one, which jammed the rifle, and printed her using the other 4. So, the CIDG commanders show up. We are there with her, take her into a room and interrogate her. Are you a VC? Yes. Is your village VC? Yes. Was the other village VC? Yes. And did anybody survive your village? No. Did anybody survive the other village? No. The airstrike killed everybody in these 2 villages except me. And I was halfway between the 2 villages when you struck. But why you didn't get the 3rd village, I don't understand. 3rd village? Yeah, okay. Well, exactly where is this 3rd village? Because our famous Air Force guy who knows everything, doesn't know about you. Oh, it's just over the hill from wherever. Would you show us where that is? Yes. This person was so, I don't know, provincial. I can't say backwards, but unworldly, maybe. She didn't even know enough to lie to her enemy. And that was very singular, I would say. So, next morning, another Special Forces guy gets on a helicopter, take her out. The patrol has retracted some from the, we assume, intended location, put her on the ground, and she starts taking us to where this third village is, of unknown size, unknown strength. We know what our strength of our patrol is, and we haven't the faintest idea how strong their resistance is going to be. So, when I talk about this person to other family members and whatever, I raise the question, you know what Tom Hanks did in Saving Private Ryan when he had his one German prisoner? If you have this prisoner who would shoot at you with corroded ammunition when it was 1 against 40 or 60, and you're going into an unknown village, what do you do with this person? Well, I can't say what happened because it's classified information at that time. Because Special Forces has some methods, techniques, policies, procedures that are classified, which is why everybody at Special Forces has to have a secret clearance or higher, because there are things we do we can't talk about. And I've told you about Operation Phoenix because I've seen it in print on the internet. So what was classified then has been declassified. But I don't think Special Forces procedures are going to evolve, but they're not going to become declassified.
Right. So we won't know what happened to her, but is it hard living with this information that some of the stuff you've done you can't talk about?
Well, it's the hypocrisy of it all.
Oh, tell me about that. That's interesting. I want to know. I want to know about that. That's an interesting. That's not what I was expecting.
Who recently got slapped up for waterboarding?
Well, that was the CIA, didn't they?
And so who are they dealing with? Muslim terrorists.
Right.
And you can't waterboard them, which in this case with the CIA, you're going to have a true medical doctor there when it happens. Right?
I would hope, yes. I would hope, yes.
Get them wet, and then they're going to let a doctor dry them off. Is there waterboarding going on when I'm in Vietnam? All over the place by anybody who wants to. You get them wet, they choke, you dry them off, now answer the question. Or you use electric shock, or you use sound, not deprivation, but intensity of sound. Or if you're really good at interrogating somebody, I'm taught when I'm in there in the 60s, is to be a good enough judge of human character as to which method to apply that's going to be of the best value to you with this person because of who this person is, what their values, what their characteristics are. So it's happening all over the place. And who's in command of all this? Would they be Democrats like JFK and LBJ, who are not even blinking an eye over waterboarding, or electrical shock, or whatever? That's hypocrisy to all of a sudden fine-tune somebody for doing what your political party has done in droves.
Right. Was it... So, is it, and I don't want to, now I'm going to sound conspiracy theorist, which is great. I love it. But because of your background and the way you approach this, psychology, a very thoughtful approach, Hal, do you believe in that all of what the Army wanted you to do was serendipitous, that you just kind of got shuffled around to these things, or did they have a larger plan for you? Do you just go to your first rejected for airborne school, go into intelligence, and all of a sudden pass a physical with a rubber stamp?
ROTC, not
ROTC. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe that they had a grander plan?
When I look back on it, if I'd have done my plan, I'd have been a second lieutenant. I'd have been sent to Vietnam. I'd have been in command of a bunch of draftees who didn't want to be there. And being I don't know if it's by the book or, I'm going to inflict my will on you.
Mm-hmm.
I could have well been one of those guys who got fragged.
Yeah.
And didn't make it out because of, that happens. And it happens not to everybody, of course, but I don't even know if it happens to certain kinds of individuals. But I know that if I've been drafted off the street and I get sent to Vietnam and somebody is jerking my chain, things could happen.
Yeah.
And so what happened to me is probably a better road for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about this. You've got this Sergeant Haefer and your friend Trung Si. Is that? And I could be. My pronunciation of Vietnamese is. I've just learned how to spell Xuan Loc the other day. So.
What'll really screw you up is Nuigen.
When.
Yes.
I've learned that. See,
How do you get that out of?
I have no. Well, I've always said the worst thing that ever happened to the Polish people, besides being sandwiched in between Germany and Russia, was the Roman alphabet. And I think I don't know that we've done a lot of favors to Vietnamese putting them on the Roman alphabet. So Trung Si was. Tell me a little bit, because you've got this great.
I'm in a Trang.
Okay.
And I get up in the morning and I head to the S2 section.
Okay.
It's in the command compound, I guess, of building. What would be the north end is the S2, the south end is the S1 section. Colonel Kelly, the commanding officer, is somewhere in between. And a word about Colonel Kelly. He's a colonel, a full bird colonel. But he commands 100 A teams, several B teams, some C teams, 4 C teams. He should be a 1-star, if not a 2-star general. Why isn't he?
I don't know.
Because there's 1-star generals all over the dang place.
So there's just too many of them, so he gets...
We don't want you to be a 1-star general because you think you're better than the rest of us because you're special forces and you get to do all these special things and you get all this money from the CIA, and this is one thing we can control. You won't be a 1-star general, even though by rights you could have a command of a unit half that size and be a 1-star general in the rest of the regular army. So there's resentment going on there.
Okay.
Politics.
Doesn't surprise me that the military has politics.
So, Colonel Kelly, because it's 2 armies, he is protected by the Look Long Doc Viet is the name of the word for South Vietnam's special forces. Look Long Doc Viet. They honor Colonel Kelly with bodyguards. There's a word I'm trying to think of that's not coming to me. Honor guard, that's it. And Trung Si is the top NCO of Colonel Kelly's honor guard. So I get up in the morning, I'm heading to my S2 office, and I walk by Colonel Kelly's car with Trung Si out there giving it a little bit of a dust job. And I say, "Chawa, Mignoy." Good morning, sir, how are you? And he calls me back in English. And I start going to work a little bit earlier so I can chat with him because he's a pretty friendly guy. And he asks if I will help him learn better English. I ask if he will help me learn better Vietnamese. And so I budget about 10 minutes a day to chat with Trung Si, find out who he is, what he's up to, whatever. we get to be close enough friends that he asks, would you like to jump with us? Because if I make 2 jumps in that foreign country, they will honor me with awarding me their jump wings, which is what's on my right breast pocket of my uniform, is because Trung Si invited me to go jump with them.
And you learned a little bit of Vietnamese along the way?
Well, when I first spent my 6 months in Nha Trang, I didn't go downtown very often because I didn't know enough Vietnamese to get along that well. That changed over the period of time.
And so you had some interaction with Vietnamese people in the language. What are your memories or your thoughts about that?
Well, if you resort to what I call, and most people did, pidgin English, you could get along pretty well, because our language knows a little bit about French, and most Vietnamese are bilingual and becoming trilingual, which puts us to shame for us being the haughty Americans with college degrees, and these being people who walk behind a water buffalo all day, doing much better at a foreign language than I've ever done.
Right, right.
So I respect them for that.
Absolutely. So you spent 6 months in Nha Trang with the with the sources. You spent another 6 months. 6 months with the Project Oak. You were there for 18 months.
Yes.
So my math isn't right. Boy, when you have a journalist doing math, tell me about the next 6 months.
Well, know what the regulations are. Only pay the one source, source control, get them registered. Then go use sources yourself, right? Run a net. The next thing they asked me to do is join the mobile training team.
Okay.
Mobile means you're going around. Training team, you're going to train somebody else. Haefer, you've learned source control. You've learned running intelligence nets. Now we want you to go out to A teams, live with them for maybe 6 weeks, and bring their intel sergeants up to snuff on knowing what you know. So I spent what I do. From January to February of '68, I was at Mong Buk, M-A-N-G, new word B-U-K, A226. He was my first student. He was who they had in mind when they started to design this part of the mobile training team. He learned well. He was convinced he had VC in his camp. And, of course, there's VC out in the village around. Then in February to March, I went to Play Me, P-L-E-I-M-E, A255. And Play Me had been overrun 2 years before I got there. March to April, Tain in a B team. And then April to May, Trang Sup, T-R-A-N-G, S-U-P, A301. So I went to those 4 different locations in that 6 months, working with the intel sergeants there to get them further down the road than otherwise. So I'm out in the field doing training of what I know that I've learned in the past year.
Yeah. What is field, now being out in the field, that must have been a completely different experience than being a resident in Saigon.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, what I did with my .38 pistol was, and I'll give you a little story of international relationships. One of the guys wanted to borrow it a lot, and to get me to let him have this pistol, I'll build you a holster. I'll build you a shoulder holster. So he built me a shoulder holster for this .38 Smith & Wesson that I could wear under my field jacket. That came in pretty handy. Not all bar girls are what everybody thinks a bar girl is. When I was at Tay Ninh, there was this one bar girl that everybody, the Special Forces, go there when you want a beer, go there when you want a Coke, whatever, because Gigi is a good girl. And she's by herself, trying to make a living selling Coke on ice, hot Coke on ice. That's a tough sell.
Right, yeah, but it is Vietnam. You are out there.
So I became a pretty frequent customer of Gigi's, have a little chat with Gigi, with my buddies, and there's not a lot of people coming and going for nefarious purposes. It was truly more like home than almost any place else you can go. I go into Gigi's once, and I think we were on an ammo run, and I was going to buy the guys a drink before we go pick up the ammo. And I walk through the door, and there's 3 Filipino officers, I'd say moderately molesting her. And this is my business, this is my trade. I can't run them off from Gigi's point of view. So she's squirming around and jumping and slapping and trying to serve them drinks. And I just get really, really mad when I see this. And I shout, "Stop what you're doing, she's not that kind of girl." Well, I'm one pukey American coming through the door with my concealed weapon, my rifle's back in the truck, because what am I going to need a rifle for in Gigi's bar? And so the 3 of them start to rise and pick up their rifle, and they're going to take care of this American, right? Who am I to be telling them what to do with a Vietnamese girl? Well, I can reach under my jacket and pull out that .38 pistol, but they don't know that. And they're continuing to do what they're continuing to do, pick up their 3 rifles. But I've got this little batch of groupies, which you can often get for reasons that are kind of difficult to explain. And so Sweet Pea is my name for him, has an M72 grenade launcher. But it's not just a grenade launcher, because, Fort Meade, Massachusetts does experimental things, and they've developed a projectile that will come out of the end of the grenade launcher, which is about like that is little plastic triangular darts that will just shred the meat right off you. And he's trying to come through the door, and here comes the barrel of this grenade launcher, and he's got the drop on him. And if he'd have shot that, they would have been just slapped up against the wall, something fierce, because it was pretty right. Decent range on it. So there's kind of the ebb and flow of values back and forth, and that all bar girls are professional whatevers, and you do what you do to help what you need to help.
Yeah. Was this an eye-opening experience for a kid from Montana? I mean, you're halfway around the world. You're learning that hot Coke and over ice in Tay Ninh and in Saigon. This is a heck of. I mean, you said earlier you wanted to see the world, learn about it. This was a heck of an education in 18 months, it seems to me. Well, I can tell you how much I've learned in 18 months, and it hasn't been that much.
I've learned things there that my friends back on the block will never know about. And because of my unit, things that people at other units know precious little about. I mean, when you get into Intel, it's a pretty closed society. Either you're in it or you're out of it, and you don't know what's going on in it.
Were there, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. How do you think Vietnam shaped your life?
That's an interesting question. Well, a much broader perspective.
Okay.
What I think isn't always the right solution for where you're at. I need to work every day on being open-minded, or more open-minded, because not everybody is me. I don't have the circumstances a lot of other people have, and they need to deal with what they are at in the world to their best of ability and their best of thinking, their best experiences, their cultural values, their religious values. And so one size doesn't fit all. I'm right for me. I'm not right for anybody else. You've got to make up your own decisions. And I need to try to understand why you did what you did, but it's not my job to correct what you did.
Right. So at the end of 18 months, you get to come home. 18 months seems longer than what normal. Now, is that a special forces in country? Because most guys went either 12 or 13.
I had to extend.
Okay.
So my 3-year tour obligation, I had about 9 months left in the Army. And I'm thinking, okay, I go back having done what I've done, and I get assigned to a unit, maybe not a special forces unit, for 9 months. And they're going to train and want to tell me all about going to Vietnam. But I just came back from there. I ain't going back again. So, am I going to go quietly, or am I going to go kicking and screaming? Am I going to get in trouble? Because just standing there doing the ordinary Army things, especially if I get into an ordinary unit, that's not going to go well. That's not who I am. So I'm better off staying here for another 6 months and getting a 90-day early out, or a 3-month early out, and get on with the rest of my life.
Were you? I know that as soldiers got short, they got real antsy about in any little thing. So a lot of them, I've talked to. You're the first person. So you're number 65, I believe. I've talked to a lot of people, and many of them were given this option. And you're the first one I know that I think that I can remember that's taken it. Didn't that worry you, getting short and maybe being in that one sapper, one satchel charge, you're putting your life on the line?
Well, not that much.
Okay.
That's not my feeling. It's
okay.
It's like I went to college and learned about snow skiing when I was a sophomore, and I was on the ski patrol in my senior year. There's life to be lived and fun things to do. I've rolled cars twice and had muscle cars in the muscle car era, and that's where I focus and go to is, okay, here I am, where's the good stuff? I'll go get some of that.
You're right.
As opposed to behind that door some bad stuff. Okay, don't go there. But don't focus on it. My wife, mother, trained her children, her 4 daughters, to be scaredy cats. I have trouble with my wife sometimes because that's not who I am, that's not what I do, that's not the way I operate, and it doesn't work that well for me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what were the happiest. One of the things that I've heard from veterans over there was it wasn't all, even in some pretty intense combat experiences, they had some really good memories over there too.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of your favorite memories?
Well, the successes I had.
Yeah.
I got some things done that other people didn't do well at. And so I don't want to say being better than other people, but succeeding where other people didn't made me feel good. Happy. I had some really good buddies there. And, well, one short story.
Yeah.
There were different times that I would get very critical or bitchy or complaining. And my first sergeant would tune me up. One time he took me into the commanding officers of our sections office because he had an air conditioner. And he stood me at attention in front of the air conditioner. And, Sergeant Haefer, you need to cool down. And so I reflected that I had been behaving somewhat poorly, and I had better behavior within me. And this isn't going well for me if my first sergeant has me in the commander's office in front of his air conditioner because he needs to tune up on me. So some other things, it's just, I like to solve something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if my car isn't running right, I want to know what's going on and see if I can fix it. And figuring things out and doing things the right way, or what I think is the right way, is where I want to go. And this snow skiing for the 3 years at Bozeman got so intense that I started taking classes. Bozeman's on the quarter system. Monday, Wednesday, Friday only classes. No Tuesday and Thursday, 2 credit courses. Why? So I can go skiing on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 4 days a week. Now, I'll also admit that if there was really a good snowfall on a Sunday, I'd skip class on Monday. So I can get pretty intense into certain things, certain activities. I like to see, or I did, in my muscle car era, I think I can take this car around this hill or curve faster than other people can because I have confidence in the car, I have confidence in me, and only slipped twice.
Right. So you're only wrong twice, but you're right a lot more than that, I have a feeling.
Yes.
Let's talk about your exit from Vietnam. How did that happen? And what was that feeling like?
Well, again, it goes back to a little lesson in Special Forces. My tour is basically over. I go back to the 90th Replacement Depot. I'm levied to be going home, but I'm not booked yet. And it actually takes 2 weeks before I do get booked out. So I'm sitting at the 90th Repo Depot for 2 weeks. There's a Special Force, and I'm wearing Special Forces uniforms. There's a Special Forces guy who sees me over there. He comes over and he says, I'm a two-truck organization. My buddy has already left. His replacement hasn't shown up. Would you like to drive my truck for me, my second truck? In fact, since you're a rookie at driving trucks, I'll give you my best truck, and I'll drive my worst truck. Sure, why not? I just sitting around here anyway. So I need to get a driver's license. Well, it's just like the other thing. I just go down. They hand me a driver's license for a 5-ton tractor. So that's like a semi-truck.
Right. Had you ever driven one?
No. Or even a deuce and a half, for that matter.
Right. They didn't even step you up.
Truck. Okay, he says, follow me, try to keep up. I've got the bad truck. And so we go get a load. What are we going to haul? We're going to haul corrugated steel. Well, what's the load limit? Oh, about this much. We've got this much corrugated steel on the back of our truck, so it's probably got twice its recommended limit or its legal limit. And he heads down the road. There's where I came the closest to getting killed, is in those 2 weeks.
Your last 2 weeks, too, by the way.
Truck, yes. Yeah. And so he gets totally out of sight ahead of me on this road. I just follow him to wherever the load goes. And I'm heading down this really narrow piece of pavement. Drops off about 4 inches into sand. There's a deuce and a half full of GIs coming the other way. I pull my front tire over to the minimum because if I drop off into that sand, it's going to jackknife, and 3 tons or whatever of corrugated steel is going to come slicing through me. And my truck that I'm driving is the canvas top with no canvas top.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a convertible, kind of nice. And this deuce and a half looks like he wants to play chicken with me, but I can only go over this far, and that's it. That's as far as I'm going. I'm not going to drop that wheel into the sand. The 2 mirrors hit. That's how close they are. And the spraying glass goes behind me, and his spraying glass goes behind him, which is where his GIs are. And so they get hit with a bunch of metal shards. And I could hear him shouting. I get to where my buddy is. I said, I'm sorry, but I just broke the mirror off your truck. Because a deuce and a half. Oh, yeah, that guy, I ran him off the road. Thanks a lot, because he nearly killed me. If he'd have been any closer, if the box of my truck and the box of his truck hit, that'd have been pretty much it. But he's just close enough to get both mirrors. In the last week I was in Vietnam.
Wow. Wow, so you finally got was that the time that you were most afraid for your life then? I mean, while you were over
in the truck.
Okay.
One of the things that is peculiar, the people get so used to you being there. This big truck goes through a crossroads. People are gathered at the crossroads. They're standing on the pavement. They don't look up at you. They hear you coming. At the last second, they step off out of the way. It's like, this is amazing. I had adrenaline. I had excitement. I had motivation. But I had training, and I had a reputation to support. I was with some really tremendous people in a really tremendous unit. I wasn't tremendous. I was just trying to keep up with the average guy and belong. And that was more my focus of not doing anything to defame this unit.
What did you miss most about home while you were over there?
Ice cream.
That was quick. That was one of the quicker answers. I like this. Any particular flavor? Or didn't it matter?
Just straight vanilla would have did me.
Really? Yeah. No ice cream over there?
Well, no even real milk.
Yeah, I've heard tell.
So,
what did you communicate a lot with home or with people back here,
About every 2 weeks I'd write a letter.
Okay.
But I didn't tell them what was really going on.
Okay.
Things were always fine. How are you? What's going on next door?
Right. So it wasn't really, they didn't know necessarily what you were doing.
They didn't know anything about anything I was doing.
Did you get to tell them, or was it still all classified when you came home?
Several years ago, a retired Army enlisted man became a teacher in Poplar Elementary School, whose students were served by my wife, the librarian at that time. He had his students write letters inviting veterans to come to his classroom and share their experience with his students. So maybe 15 to 20 letters went out inviting veterans to come to his class because he was a veteran himself, understood the concept, whatever. I was the only one that responded to those 15 to 20 letters. What I did was start a DVD. You've seen pictures I have. And I start the DVD off with, when I was in 4th grade, I lived at Mystic Lake. Point out the different houses. My little sister was born that year. And then I went off to high school at Great Falls High, from the Mystic Lake one-room schoolhouse to a 3-story, full block, not counting the football field. Big change. And I had a lot of trouble fitting in with that student body because they all came from 3 different junior highs. they all knew everybody they needed to know. I was Norman, new guy, dropping out of the sky, and nobody needed to know me because they all knew enough of who they needed to know. So, and I was playing with Tommy and Johnny, who were in 4th grade. That was my buddies when I was in the 8th grade, 4 years younger than me. We'd play Cowboys and Indians, we'd play war, we'd do whatever at Mystic Lake. So I was way behind maturation-wise, and it's a slow process coming up, gaining 4 years on your peers. And so that experience was of some value in getting to where I am today. And go back. There's a part of your question I didn't get.
Well, when we talked about, let's see here, we talked about what did you miss in the communication?
With hope? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm making this DVD. That's where I'm at. And so then I bring it through graduation from high school, going through the Army, going through Vietnam. And it's about a 46-minute DVD. When I show it to nephews and nieces, wow. I mean, everybody is just super impressed. And I'm thinking, well, it's what happened. But why are you so impressed? Because I'm not a tenth of impressed over what the DVD is, as you seem to be. And so I have shown it to nephews, nieces, sisters, and there's still some people that want to see it.
Let's talk about leaving Vietnam. So finally you quit driving trucks.
Get on the airplane, come home.
Get on the plane. What was that like coming home?
Well, in a way it was sort of sad because I'm never going to be able to do some of these spectacular things again. Spectacular as I see it. Mm-hmm. And so I go back to school on the GI Bill. I get a teaching certificate. I find out that you've got to be a coach if you're going to be a social studies teacher. And I'm thinking, I've learned a lot of stuff that none of these other social studies teachers can teach you because they haven't been where I've been and done what I've done. And I can't teach social studies because I don't coach girls basketball or whatever, which is just a game.
Right.
These people aren't dying. These people aren't killing. Right. People don't have to live in poverty. And I'm a little underwhelmed with coaches. They're kind of stuck on themselves.
Right.
And they're making the girls run laps so that they can win games. The girls don't win the games from the coach's point of mind. The coach wins the game. I'm thinking, I think you need to be a little adjusted here on your attitude. Mm-hmm. This game isn't about you, coach. It's about the kids. And it's only a game.
Yeah. Yeah. When you came back, what was the welcome like? Was there a welcome?
Well, my parents were glad to see me. That's about it.
Did you fly back to Billings, to Bozeman, to Great Falls?
Back to Great Falls.
Okay. Was it hard? So you're doing all these. You've done amazing things. You're working with operatives. You're working with intelligence. You're working with training, and then you come back to regular life. Is that a hard adjustment?
Well, what it had done for me, because I spent the 1 year getting a teaching certificate, which went nowhere because I'm not a coach. So then I went back to graduate school to become a counselor. And it's somewhat embarrassing to say this, but up through my first degree, I just went to school and took the test. I didn't apply myself. I would say it's probably a fact that I hadn't grown up. But after I came back from Vietnam, got to graduate school, I decided I could put my efforts and talents into getting good grades and getting to become a good counselor, which again is human behavior. How do you treat somebody with a problem that they've got that I'll never have? I'll never get pregnant. I don't know why, I just believe that.
All right.
And so, but I've been helpful to other people in other locations. Perhaps I can do something for you. And so that's where I want to go with my life, is to help you ease the pain, come to the resolution, the conflict resolution that's in your life, show you that there are other options, and depending upon who you are and what your values are, which option of the options that I can think of is going to work out perhaps the best for you.
So you really used. I can see how you both were affected by it, but also really, I think, used part of your experience and channeled it back towards people.
I would say that's true.
Looking back, on one hand, we're doing this series because it's 50 years, and 50 years is an arbitrary number. It's a good excuse, but it's still arbitrary. But it does give some time, and time yields perspective. How do you, now looking back on Vietnam, on the war, how do you view it now, and has that changed from when you would have been in the Army or gotten out?
Well, I wish that they would have been as interested in freedom as I am, as dedicated to running their own country as I was interested in helping them become able to run their own country. But that didn't happen. And it's sort of like, if you deserve to be punished for missing that opportunity, what I know about what communists have done, and you're back under communist control, I don't like being judgmental, but my judgment would be you sort of deserve what you got.
Right, right. Have you been back to Vietnam, or, okay, do you have any desire?
Not a lot.
Okay. Have you been to the Vietnam War Memorial?
Oh, if you want to watch me cry, send me there.
Okay, fair enough. Have you been? So you have not been there, I take it, or have you been?
I have been
in there?
And I just can't help but cry.
Yeah, that's you wouldn't be the first one. Was that a hard thing to go? I mean, obviously it's a hard thing to go to, but as someone who is over there, it's got to be even deep.
So much that if you take it at little doses at the time, you could deal with it. But you see that black wall. Excuse me. It's like it all comes back at once. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you can't deal with it that much at one time. As the little doses that occurred, I could keep up with that and cope with it. But there's certain names on that wall that just brushed me up. I mean, just now I'm losing it.
Yeah. Is it, when you look for, one of the things, this is a finite moment in time, this interview right now. So there's been 50 years, but one of the reasons we're doing this is because I want in another 50 years people to still be able to access Vietnam from people who are there, not just in books. And I'm a book hoarder, so I'm not dissing books. But I want people to be able to hear voices and see faces. As a guy who is over there, what do you want people 50 years from now to remember?
Well, I think that politicians make decisions, important decisions. They make decisions to go to war. I think the law should be that a given percentage of the politicians who make those decisions and pass those laws go themselves, regardless of their age. Because there are things you learn that they don't know, and they need to know. And they need to go where I learned it to learn it themselves. Because chit-chatting amongst themselves at the Capitol isn't getting the job done. Mm-hmm. And so don't say we're looking at all other options and we're going to war because it's the only option that works. I don't think you probably tried hard enough on the other options. You just took the expedient way out.
Yeah.
But if you had to go yourself, would you give it more thought, more thoughtful consideration?
You bet.
And that's, I guess, my end view on it is this is serious stuff. You know, like that Vietnamese woman, and it's well, there's another thing I'll tell you about.
Sure.
I'm at one of the A-teams out in the boondocks, and because I think it's kind of funny in a way, there are 5 little orphan boys living in the Special Forces team house. The commanding officer is Richard somebody. Okay?
Okay.
Each of the 5 little boys is also a Richard. And he will bellow at them and order them in. They'll all come in, stand at attention, salute, and do their little military stuff that they've learned. Eat with us, watch the movies with us, fall asleep in your lap with us, and are just pretty happy little guys. I did write home about that situation. And so my aunt, who attended a large church in Great Falls, mentioned it to her ladies, and they sent a huge box of clothes over to that A-team to clothe these little boys. Now, so you'll really understand from a military point of view what the commanding officer, who's Richard, is really saying when he's calling the 5 little Richards. And so to get the point of what I'm saying without me needing to say it, what other word do you use when you're talking to a Richard?
Yeah. Dick, yeah.
And so he'd bellow out, "Little, get in here." And
right.
They were the little ones, and he was the big one.
Wow. So, yeah. So you learned more than a lot more than probably what you had ever bargained for.
Oh yeah.
Are there ways in which Vietnam still affects you? I mean, besides, you had this experience, but are there ways in which Vietnam changed who you were?
Well, like I told you, I graduated from the 8th grade with 4th graders, 10-year-olds, as my buddies. Spent 4 years in Great Falls High, still not as mature for my age as my age was. And it sort of went somewhat to that same extent through college. So I was behind the game as an ordinary person when I went into the Army. And that helped close the gap quite a bit, shaped it in some different directions, and became more open-minded, more mature, in my opinion, than I had been prior to that.
Yeah, yeah. What have I missed? We've been talking for a while. I've made you talk for a long time. What have I missed?
John Wayne was in Vietnam when I was there.
Really?
He was doing research for his movie.
Okay, was that on the Green Beret?
Yes. And I never got to see him. But being hosted by 5th Special Forces, he got whatever he wanted, and he got the best of what we had. I think this is a very interesting but seldom known fact about John Wayne. They sent him to one of the best A-teams in the country, from the colonel's point of view, and bragged him up because he had fought a lot of wars.
Right, in movies.
This is a big warrior, the Special Forces people tell the Vietnamese. And so they decided to adopt him into their tribe. And they have a ceremony. And one part of the ceremony is somebody with a little brass bracelet takes their bracelet off and puts it on the person that's now a member of your tribe. And when we fight, you can come and fight and help us fight our enemy. I assume that that act was so significant to him that he's never taken the bracelet off. Now, when you're in Ben-Hur movie, you can't have your wristwatch on. There's somebody whose job it is to look at you before you go on camera to make sure everything's the way it should be. And if you weren't John Wayne, they'd have never approved of this little brass bracelet. But in every movie he made since then, if you look for it, you'll find his little brass bracelet. So that had to be a telling moment in his development that somebody would adopt me. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I had to go on the internet to see a bald John Wayne. Any other movie or any other picture you'll see, he has his wig on because he went bald. But there's a picture of him with an A-team, and his pretension had been set aside. I may be John Wayne, but I'm going to be sitting here in this picture with this team, who I am, the way I am, and I am bald. And so getting his picture taken as a bald person and or never taking off that bracelet is something that is rare to know.
But it kind of symbolizes the impact that that experience can have on a person.
Yes.
What else? Anything else that I'm missing?
I had, for some reason, I was always the guy in charge. Do you know what a Ma Deuce is?
No.
A 50 caliber machine gun, an M2.
Okay. Yep, okay.
And if you want to reach out and touch somebody, a 50 caliber is what you want.
I imagine so.
So when I'm at Nha Trang, there's the main gate. Beside it is a cinder block bunker, and my job is on top of that bunker behind a 50 caliber. And so I had to make my little map out, where are the limits of where I should fire, what to avoid, what to setting, how far out this is, whatever. And there was a downed helicopter out in that rice paddy that they'd stripped of anything valuable, but they left the hull. And so you figure out how far the hull is, and when you would hit that helicopter hull with a 50 caliber machine gun tracer, those ricochets would go just do wild things. And you say to yourself, we're getting the job done now. And my job was to train other people subordinate to me how to operate that 50 caliber. Another thing about that rice paddy, now that I think about it, it was used as a drop zone, training Vietnamese how to be paratroopers. It's a rice paddy. It's got water, shallow water, hot day. You can sometimes see the heat waves going up. Sometimes a Vietnamese jumper would get stuck in the sky because he's jumping a parachute that's designed for a 200-pound American paratrooper carrying about 100 pounds of equipment with him. So it's got a load of 300 pounds. He's maybe 40 kilos, around 100 pounds, little over, little under. And if a updraft catches his parachute,
especially if heat,
he won't come down. And he's just stuck up there. So with your megaphone, pull a slip on a riser, tilt your canopy so you'll slide off of that updraft.
So you got to teach him how to land.
Wait, how to get out of the air.
Right. Not a problem. I've never had that problem. Just I know people can't see me on camera, but I'm pretty sync worthy.
When I was undercover in Vietnam, in Saigon, you'll remember at that time where they captured a VC who was doing bad stuff they brought him to the National Police Chief's area, and he shot the guy in the head.
Yeah.
On TV.
Yep.
I had a National Police pass signed by that guy. And there are no city police, county sheriffs, state police. There are just the National Police, and he's the commander of that unit. So, because I had a pass from him, I could go anywhere at any time. There's a 10 o'clock curfew. Everybody has to be off the streets. I pull up to a check stop, pull out my pass, get a really snappy salute, and I just go through the checkpoint because I have a pass by this important general. What else we got here? One of the things I did when I was out at the A-teams, they're under strength, they're overworked,
right,
and they're living a dangerous life. And after a year in that location, you get pretty run down. Especially when you go out on patrols, you can lose 5 pounds on a 2-week patrol. So, my MOS, a 97B40 special agent, is written so that I can never be put on KP or guard duty. It's against regulations to put me on KP or guard duty. So I get to these A-teams, some of these guys are pretty well run down. I tell the team sergeant, you cannot put me on guard duty. So, there's nothing in that regulation that says I can't volunteer. And so, I'm volunteering. Let me take so-and-so's guard duty. You know, whoever I judge is
most run down
needs an extra hour of sleep, or at least an uninterrupted night. And when you're doing guard duty, it's kind of interesting in that for your hour, you're walking around the compound with a starlight scope, looking down at the guy down the road, the Vietnamese, sitting at his guard station to see if he's awake. Because people sometimes fall asleep at the weirdest times.
It's nighttime.
Yeah. And the starlight scope is pretty interesting. I mean, it just intensifies the light out there, and you can see a whole lot more than you can otherwise.
Was it scary doing guard duty in places that you may not have necessarily been before? Or, I mean, it can be dangerous if someone's out there, right?
Understanding the layout of the path that you need to walk is, I mean, there's some stuff happening, like the women live inside your compound, and the children, the married women to these people that are in your compound, and they need to go places in the middle of the night, and you don't expect them to be there, but they are, and so it's kind of interesting. But it's you know, you raise the question of fear, and it's like my mind is somewhere else doing something else most of the time. And my own safety is not uppermost in my mind.
Where is your mind? What is it doing? Like, what does it do to keep occupied? I mean,
I hadn't really thought about telling you this, but my body, I assume your body as well, is a pretty interesting phenomenon in that there were times I was so bored in basic training, standing there getting nothing done. It was pointless. It's hot. I'm sweating. I'm uncomfortable. And I'm having an out-of-body experience. It's like, well, the pain is less if I, whoever the real me is, the inside me is really someplace else that's more comfortable.
Right.
This is working for me.
Right.
You know? I made some night jumps when I was in Vietnam. And the interesting thing I learned, or I think I learned about that, is you have a biological clock. At that time in my life, my heartbeat was 60 beats per minute. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not. But I had jumped from 1,100 feet out of an airplane enough times that I had pretty much felt, it's a feeling state, not me, a mental process state, knew when I was going to hit the ground. And so when you're jumping in the dark, you leave a noisy airplane, it's all dark out, the noise leaves you, it's quiet, it's peaceful, the air is slowly rising up in your face, it's comfortable. But all of a sudden you get really tense because probably within the next 10 seconds you hit the ground. And that knocks the wind out of you. I'm told the ordinary paratrooper when he hits the ground is doing 25 miles an hour. And to come to a stop in the length of your body is you've got to have a correct parachute landing fall to spread the impact out over your body so that nothing gets broken, like I saw snap, snap, the guy who wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. Well, I also believe, rightly or wrongly, that why is it, I guess let's start that with the question. I could be sitting up in bed wondering why I'm sitting up in bed, and then with the next incoming round, know why I'm sitting up in bed. But if there's no incoming, the guy who's on guard duty, and I did this myself, will send outgoing mortar rounds at random times throughout the night. Why don't those wake me up? But an incoming round will. I mean, is it, well, I don't really know what to call it, but it's, my best theory is incoming rounds often have a little whistle, boom, but this isn't enough to wake you up. And outgoing rounds, the mortar round isn't stable yet, and it's wobbling back and forth before it stabilizes itself, and you hear a as it goes back and forth. Is that enough to make the difference? And so there's where my mind is, trying to figure out what is going on here with this. And you get to the point where you hear a rifle discharge, and you think you know that it's an M14, an M16, an AK-47, and your buddy thinks the same thing. Where does that come from? When did that happen? Can it happen again? You know, could I still do that? And it's like just physiological, psychological things that happen that cause you to stop and wonder about it. There's some other physiological thing, but it doesn't come to me right now. Well, I've learned the value of military methods. Repetition can be a lifesaver. And well, let's carry on, and it'll come to me at some time.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You brought something with you. I want to know what that is over there.
The flute?
Yeah.
It's a Montagnard flute.
Can I
Central Highlands.
Can I bring it to you? Can you show?
Sure.
Let me bring it to you since you're mic'd up.
So these are all hollow. And there's the mouthpiece.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure what this is, tree sap or whatever, but it's drying out, and so it leaks air.
Okay.
But before it dried out, with the little holes for a right-handed player, and holes on the other side, so I guess you're ambidextrous, or I guess it's two hands. But it was in tune when I got it. And this old man, or at least he looks old because of a hard life perhaps, came to our compound, and his family was hungry. So he brought this with him, and I can't believe how long it would take to build this, but he wanted to trade it for some rice. So I take a look at him, and I go to the warehouse and get a bag of rice and put it across his shoulders, and he goes wobbling down the trail back to his family. So after he got, maybe 20 yards away, I looked at two guys, go take that for him, take it back to his house. So most other Special Forces people bring back crossbows and arrows. Well, I didn't capture any crossbows or arrows, but I did trade for this.
Wow, that's a very cool piece. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I've never seen anybody else that had a flute. So I think it is pretty unusual, pretty rare.
Is it, did you hear it being played? I mean, have you heard something
He just
like...
brought it in to trade, and I have blown into it, and it was in pretty good tune at that point in time.
Wow. That's fascinating. Here, I'll take it back. So this is what a bag of rice. That is amazing. And this looks like, is this bamboo, or what kind of?
I would say yes, bamboo.
Yeah, this is bamboo. That is fascinating. So tell me, is there anything else that we have missed, kind of in our conversation today?
My handwriting? Oh, this is, I missed John Wayne, right?
Right, you did.
Okay. But I did see Martha Ray.
Okay.
Who is an older, I guess, vaudeville movie star. She's a lieutenant colonel in the Women's Army.
Okay.
And she's a registered nurse. She would make several trips to Vietnam over her lifetime and go out in the field with her skills and abilities to help the medical nurses learn to be better nurses. And so I did run into Martha Ray. She put on kind of a stand-up comedy act for us at the Trang, at the theater there. Martha Ray drinks scotch, and she can drink almost anybody I've ever seen under the table.
This is good to know.
And she likes to hang with the senior officers because they're into scotch and whatever.
Right, and she's an officer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're just enlisted people.
Right.
So. But what she said was, at this little stand-up thing, you've got your Green Beret. It's like you're my brother or my son. So whenever you're in my hometown, Los Angeles, and you need a place to stay or you need a meal, drop by, and if I'm not there, my people know what to do. And so anybody in Special Forces, whether it's 5th, 3rd, or wherever, you're always welcome at Martha Ray's house. And I thought that was pretty singular. You see him, I have my assistant.
I do see your assistant, and I appreciate your assistant, too.
I'm in Saigon.
Okay.
So where do you go during the day when it's your day off, if you ever get a day off.
Right, I didn't know there was a...
So I would go down to the USO in Saigon because that's where you can get a different book to read or the super, super thin airmail, paper, and envelopes. So I would habitate the USO on occasion. The last time I did, which is not the reason it's the last time, I come out of the USO, I'm standing on the porch of the front door, and off to my right, I see a Korean convoy going to their compound. Because they're one of the allies there, and there's about 4 or 5 deuce and a halves full of Koreans. They've been off doing what they're doing. They're heading back to their compound. The problem is they're on a one-way street that's supposed to go from my left to my right. And so they're coming down on their deuce and a halves, and this guy's pulling off the road, this guy's pulling off the road, because they're loaded for bear. The other part of the story you need to understand is the National Police Force, from the group that I got to stay out at night pass. They are called the White Mice. They're the National Police Force, but since they have little white shirts and they're small men, they have the nickname of being the White Mice. One of them decides to stop the convoy. Why? Because you're going down the wrong way down my road.
Right.
Turn around and go back. He's shouting in Vietnamese. The Korean officer doesn't understand Vietnamese. He starts shouting at the White Mouse in Korean. So this guy's on the ground shouting. This guy's standing up in his deuce and a half shouting. The White Mice has a pistol. The Korean has a Harvey. Shout, 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 shout. Nothing's going anywhere. The White Mouse is exactly in front of the truck, so the truck can't move. So the Korean officer's solution is fix it with his rifle and shoots the guy. The guy falls to the ground, starts to bleed. The truck rolls on, the convoy rolls on. The next thing that happens, it's like the Keystone Cops. 2 jeeps with about 4 or 5 white mice with pistols drawn, waving in the air, come around the corner to where this guy is. They jump out, look, stand around him, shout, talk, point, get back in their jeeps, and drive away. The guy's still laying there in the street bleeding. Eventually, an ambulance comes and picks him up. Whether he lived or not, I'm not sure.
Wow. How do you process that? What do you make of that?
I've never seen anything like that before in my life, and hope to never see it again.
Fair enough.
It's just, in focus is 2 different cultures, 2 different languages, not that much respect for each other, although the guy was supposed to enforce the traffic laws. And it leads me to another point where there's a lot of different Asian cultures in Vietnam. I told you the fracas I had with the Filipino officers. Here's Korean and Vietnamese. And there's other, Saigon itself has 2 suburbs, Cholon and Saigon, Cholon, and not Bien Hoa. But those are different cultural zones. And so they don't mix well. They go off to their own little part of Saigon. And so what I've never seen, well, there's even people from India over there running little shops. And I've seen more cruelty of one of those Asian races to the other than I've seen anywhere else. Gia Dien, that's the third one. Saigon, Cholon, Gia Dien.
So it could be not only a cruel place, just from a war zone, cruel place, and Americans cruel place to each other. I mean,
well, far more cruelty. I mean, less understanding from one Asian culture to the other than it was any of those Asian cultures to Americans.
Wow.
And it's like, I didn't expect that.
It seems like so many things that you just couldn't, that strikes me in Vietnam, so many things that you couldn't possibly anticipate from growing up in Great Falls or Mystic Lake.
I'd seen the John Wayne movies. I expect to go over there and win. Because, after all, we got the Air Force, the Marines, the Army, the Navy.
Everybody's over there.
Yeah.
I can't think of a much better place to that's a great closing, Mark. And I want to say a couple things, Hal. Thank you for bringing all this in, and I really appreciate the stories you shared. I thank you for sharing your stories, and most of all, I thank you for your service. I thank you for going over there. And this is, I'm glad we got your stories, and I'm glad that you came in and being a part of this series. This has been Vietnam Voices by the Billings Gazette. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening.